How are you guys doing today? Today, I want to talk about my mindset as a debt collector in three different ways. I want to talk about how I started, the middle part of my life in debt collections, and then where I'm at now and why I'm doing what I'm doing today. So stay tuned. My name is Jay, and welcome to Ask a Debt Collector. Now, I've been in the debt collection industry for over 15 years. I've done it all, from skip tracing to collecting to management, and I've owned 2 debt collection agencies. For the past 8 years, I've been the go-to guy for friends and family for questions regarding debt and credit, and now I want to be that person for you. If you have any questions, put them down in the comments section. I promise I'll answer those questions. Let's go. So if you haven't had the time, be sure to like and subscribe as I give you great topics on debt and credit, but my niche or the different aspect that I come from is from a debt collector. This is something that I've wanted to do for some time, probably since like 2015. I just never, ultimately, let's just call a spade a spade. I just didn't have the confidence to actually come up. I didn't know what would happen as far as the industry goes and how people would view me, but as time progressed, I was just like, you know what, this is a need, this is something that has to be done, and so here I am. Ultimately, I got into debt collections because of a criminal background. I'll explain that to you guys at another time. It's a long story. But nevertheless, I was looking for a job. And obviously, with a criminal background, it's very difficult to get jobs. So I ran into a friend of mine's who I knew from school, from one of the schools that I went to. And he drove a nice a Beamer. And so, at 18, 19, 20 years old, I was 19. But at, 18, 19, 20 years old, he drove like a 5 Series Beamer. And I thought to myself, I wonder how he got that car. And so I ended up running into him on campus. I was in college at the time. And I was just like, hey, man, what do you do? And he tells me he does collections. And I go, collections? I was like, where you actually get on the phone and you're calling people to pay debt? And he goes, yeah. And so I'm thinking to myself, because the only, experience I've had with collections by this time is with, family and relatives where they would call and basically everyone would hang up. So I never thought that there was any money in that. So being a little skeptical as I was, I go, well, how much money do you make doing that? And he goes, I average about $5 to $6 grand a month. And at that age, I'm sitting here thinking, what? Wait. You make that much money calling people to pay their debt? He was like, yeah. So he's one of those guys that I've known, and, not that he was sketchy or anything, but I didn't really believe him. And I go, okay, I'll believe you if I see a paycheck or something. And he, just says, okay, whatever. And he leaves. Maybe 3 or 4 days later, it must have been payday for him. And I was walking, thinking about a job, needing to work. And he honked at me and he was like, hey, come here. And I was like, hey, what's up? He was like, you remember when I told you how much money I made, average $5 to $6 grand? I go, yeah. He goes, I have my pay stub here now. Shows me his pay stub, and his base pay plus the bonus that he made was around $7 grand. And I go, what? He made $7 grand? You made $7 grand? He goes, yeah, I told you, collections, this is what it is. This is where I'm making my money. This is what I'm doing. This is why I'm able to do the things that he's able to do. And so I asked, do they do, a background check? He goes, no, they don't do a background check. And I go, okay, well, if I can make that kind of money without a degree, and they're not going to marginalize me or not hire me because of my background, sign me up. So I end up, to make a long story short, I end up getting this job, right? And so I go to the first job. Now, of course, obviously, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, how the heck am I going to do this? The great thing is, because I was very, very afraid to be on the phone to try and call somebody. I know I was so nervous. So the great thing at this job, because I had no experience, they started me out as a legal verifier. So my mind state at that time span was basically I was a skip tracer, but on a smaller scale. So I would basically use the skip tracing tools that we had to check and see, pull in a credit report and to check and see if any consumer that I had, if they owned any property, if they had any assets, or if they're working. And once I verified that information, if they were, by skip tracing them, I would put it in a certain box, and then it would automatically go and they would prepare it for suit. Now, I think I was only making, $9-10 an hour doing this, but my mindset at that time span, I didn't really understand. It was just perfect. I was like, hey, I don't have to be on the phones. I'll do this. Now, after some time being in that department, I ended up, I was very good at like scheduling stuff and so forth. So I made for my boss like a sheet with regards to verifying accounts. So basically, as time progressed, I ended up getting moved up. I moved to skip tracer, a complete skip tracer. But at this job, how they did it was you partnered with another person. So it was 2 people to a team, and you skip traced accounts. And with these accounts, once you skip traced them, you actually made the calls to collect. And so that was pretty cool. I did that. I would make bonuses. It bumped up my base pay. I think I was making like 12, maybe $11 an hour plus commission. It sucked because we had a joint commission, and in order to hit that number, we both had me and the partner both had a number to hit, and then after that, we both shared whatever the commission was. And so, because I was a verifier, I was very good at skip tracing people, finding numbers. And then now I'm learning how to get on the phone and talk to people. So the mind state at that time span was, well, these people owe this debt and they have to pay you. So, you gotta, I remember that partner that I had who was at that company for maybe 4 or 5 years, he used to say, 2 things are going to happen. Either they're going to convince you why they can't pay, or you're going to convince them why they can pay. And because we had a legal department there and so forth, if we found any account that was suit worthy, they would be sued. So the talk offs weren't so bad. It wasn't so hard. I didn't really care about who was on the other line by this time. It was about making money, but I wasn't that good at it. But I made my money and I did what I did. Fast forward a little bit, at the same company eventually, where everyone wants to be is the legal department. In the legal department, the post-judgment and pre-judgment department, there were 2 collectors back there, 2 friends that were there, and they were the ones making all the money at that company. I mean, they were making an average about 10 to 15 grand. This was towards the end of my stint with them. I got trained to work in the legal department. I understood it. I was starting out on post judgments, which basically are accounts that they already have a judgment on, and now we're skip tracing, trying to find if they're working or whatever the situation is, to do a bank levy, a tilt tap, and all that. So I learned a lot of the legal aspects of it at that time span. Now, my mind state then was, well, hey, you didn't pay your debt, you owe it, we had to sue you, so now you gotta pay, right? So this company eventually fell away, no more of that company. And so then I'm looking for work again. That company ended up, the owners, for whatever reason, money situations happen, they end up having to shut down. So I'm looking for another job. I end up finding another job in the debt collection industry. At this company, I started out, they had, here was completely different from the other spot. The legal department wasn't really where you wanted to be. You wanted to be on the debt collector side. But when I first got there, I had no idea. So I started out as a contingent collector. So basically, all the accounts that we had weren't owned. They weren't debt owned. We were actually collecting on a contingent basis with whatever the clients were. And I sat there and I did that. You have to make a certain amount of numbers, calls, you got to do all this type of stuff. Now, at this time span, my mindset as far as a consumer, a person who actually owes, I'm starting to get a little more hardened in my heart. I'm just like, hey man, either they gonna pay me or I'm not gonna make no money. And I didn't care about your situation, your circumstance. It was about collecting money. And so, I did that. I worked at this company for about 2 years. And within the confinements of working for them, I started out on the contingent side. Then I did really good. I ended up becoming a supervisor. I had about, 10 or 15 people in management. And then I overhear a friend of mine's, who was a collector on the other side. I ended up overhearing that his commission check was like $8,500. Plus he had his base pay, which I didn't know what his base pay was, but I said, $8,500 commission check, what the heck? I'm sitting here with, 11 people underneath me, and I'm lucky if I get $1,000 bonus check. And I'm like, this guy is not having near as much stress as me dealing with all these people, yet he's making $8,000 in commission checks. So I sat down with the boss. He was so upset at me. And I go, I want to be a collector. Not only do I want to be a collector, I want to sit next to that guy because he was the best one. I said, sit me next to him. I'll be just as good, if not better. With a little pulling of teeth and gnashing, they didn't initially want me to be over there, but they did. I sat next to this guy. I learned everything that he did, and we were competing. We were the two top collectors at this space for about a little over a year. As time progressed, I'm sitting, the way that my mind works is completely different. So as I'm sitting here, and yes, I'm averaging, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 commission checks, I notice that I'm making, an average of about $7,000 a month, but I'm collecting like $35,000. And so, you look at those numbers and I'm sitting here thinking like, man, what if I went into collections on my own? If I collect $35,000, I may have about $5,000 overhead. I make $30,000 instead of the $7,000. And so I talked to my buddy who didn't initially want to leave the company at all because, he had a family and so forth. He liked the benefits. He liked everything that was going on. In my head, at that time, I did have one daughter, but I was just thinking about the money. And so I told him like, hey man, I'm going to quit. I found a guy who will actually let us work for him. And he basically said every 30 cents on the dollar I would keep. So if we collected $30,000, basically I would make $9,000, which was more than what I was doing at this other job. At the job that I currently had, I didn't hit commission till after I made $14,000. So I had to collect $14,000 first, and then everything over $14,000, I made 20%. And that was considered a good thing. Most people, you hit $10,000, and then everything you make over $10,000, you make 10%. But this option was a lot better from $1. It was commission based only. So I told my partner about it. He was like, he didn't want to do it. So about a week passes. I'm like, all right, man, I'm about to put my 30-day notice in, and I'm done. I'm going to work for this guy. And he was like, oh, okay, whatever. And then he ended up putting his 30-day notice in before me. And then I did it after him. It caused all this thing. They thought we were going into business for ourselves or whatever because we were making pretty good money there, and we're going to start our own collection business. They were all nervous. Can't hire no one, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So my mind state at that time span was still the same. You owe, you going to pay. Now this is my money, as as time progressed and I started at that job. So what we did is we both worked at this job and we started our own businesses. So we basically used his skip tracing tools. We collected a lot of money for him and started building out our own businesses. Right? And so I'm going to stop the story here. This is where I'm going to stop. I'm going to do a 2-part from there. But that's where it was. Now, the mind state still was about collecting money. I did not care about who you were or what the situation was. All I saw was green money. And that's what it was. Either I'm going to convince you to pay or you're going to convince me why you're not going to pay. And chances are I'm going to win. So that's the beginning part 1. I'm going to go into part 2, which technically you're not going to get till Tuesday of next week. But if you have any questions about credit or debt, put them down in the comment section. If you want a pay to delete letter, email me at askadebtcollector@barrelrecovery.com. That'll be down in the description. Give that to you free, absolutely free. And as always, you be great.